Friday night, Roger Refugee standing by in the green room. We have brought up studio number 5 and our set is ready. Cameras are aimed, they are in focus, everything's ready to go. We'll go to our new studio in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening and welcome to PJNet Live. I hope you enjoy our new atmosphere that we're trying out. When we have a single guest, I thought I would make that guest a little bit more prominent. And tonight it will culminate a week-long educational research endeavor carried out by Refugee. And we can't wait to hear what he has found out. And the first thing that I need to do is take us to the bayou country of Louisiana and see if I can find Refugee amongst the rattlesnakes and such. But before I do that, I need to get myself a little bit out of the way. You get it? And let me get out of the way here. Thank you. Boop. Jump down. Refugee, it's been a week. We talked about it last week, and you see it all over social media. You see it all over that somebody's thumb is on the scale. True or not true?
Well, somebody's thumb is on the scale. We can debate about who's putting pressure on the thumb to put it on the scale, but YouTube made the absurd decision to literally demonetize the Louder with Crowder channel and the Louder with Crowder show, not allowing any advertising on that show. Now, when I first heard it, when I first heard that YouTube had actually done that, it of course it outraged me, it piqued my interest, everything else. But as I've researched it over the course of the week, I found out several things. One, when YouTube, when this thing first blew up, it actually took YouTube about 24 hours to make the decision to demonetize him. And at first, YouTube defended him. Okay, so YouTube defended him, and then they changed their mind, they switched their tune, they demonetized him about 24 hours later. Now, Mark, did you ever see their initial statement when they first demonetized him, when they were explaining what company policy or that he had or had not broken, or what rules of conduct he had or had not broken, or what terms of service? Did you see the first statement?
Yeah, well, I did, and I heard him talk about it also, and this is why I became alarmed, because in that statement, if I'm referring to the same statement that you are, they said there was not an issue of non-compliance, that he was golden and in compliance. However, and then they start this ethereal smokescreen, which seems to me to be an excuse. What they really should have said is, so many of our people complained and were catering to a group of left-wing progressives, and they just don't like you. So, and they called it, what do they call it? Borderline.
Yeah.
And that concerned me, because basically what it means, we're back to mob rule. Just like the Kavanaugh hearings. If people screech and scream loud enough, that dictates social mores. And it shouldn't. Reason should.
And the first thing that told me, when I said, okay, so they delayed doing, because they got a specific complaint from this guy that calls himself @GayWonk on Twitter. And is basically, as far as I'm concerned, he's a borderline fascist. He sees no problem with Antifa. He's a hardcore liberal. He's a guy who works for Vox, and he's one of the Vox commentators. And he was the first one who really came out and made a big complaint against Steven Crowder, and said that YouTube should ban Steven Crowder. And he put together a little collection of videos where, Steven Crowder imitated him, used an effeminate, sort of accent and a lisp in effeminate, in imitating him, and so on and so forth. And So at first, YouTube seemed to say, well, no, everybody on both sides is doing this all the time. This isn't a problem. But then as the whole left wing train, as the whole left wing bandwagon got going and started leaning on YouTube, they went ahead and they demonetized. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Basically, they start getting slammed by saying, "Hey, you don't have clear standards. You admitted that this guy didn't violate, your community standards, but you're going in and you're demonetizing him just because you don't like what he said." So they've kind of backtracked on that now, and they've said that the standard that he broke is that he traumatized members of the LGBT community with his speech. Okay. So, Mark, they've now got it in the community standards that if we traumatize anyone with our speech,
Now, when I think traumatized, I think emergency room, epinephrine injections, the defibrillator paddles, things like that. Is that you reckon that's what they mean by traumatized?
no, they mean some liberal yelling and screaming and saying, "I'm traumatized. I'm just so upset at this."
I don't feel
That's
safe.
literally what they mean.
I don't feel
Okay.
safe because someone's.
And Mark, you know what that means? That means that none of us that are working hard to build a platform on Twitter, we're not safe, because you know the reason that you haven't been demonetized yet, Mark.
Well, one, because I'm not monetized in the first place, but continue.
There you go. Okay. And as you begin to get monetized, you'll have to reach a certain size. Okay. You'll have to reach a certain size
Well, let's take a little
before.
detour there because when I first started using, now, by the way, my objective has never been to be a YouTube personality or sensation. We are using YouTube as the conduit by which we broadcast into our facility. So
Mhm.
anything above that. Now, of course, I registered for monetization shortly thereafter, and I don't remember, but a period of time went by when they said to their partners program that the threshold to qualify for monetization has moved. In other words, they moved the goalpost to where smaller presences or smaller accounts, whatever you want to call it, simply would not qualify. So I don't know if that was significant or not, but I don't think that was directed at anybody for anything. I think they just got tired of paying small amounts of money to small operators and figured this would be a way to cut cost and just raise the bar at which you
Mhm.
qualify for monetization. Right now it's 1,000 subscribers and I think 10,000 viewing minutes, or there's an average, but you have to have a combination of subscribers at 1,000 plus a threshold of viewing minutes over the past 12 months. So
Correct.
I don't know if that's significant, but I would bring it up.
Well, it certainly makes it more difficult for, because there's expenses and time involved with a grassroots show and with trying to grow a grassroots podcast. It certainly makes it difficult for somebody to create new content and grow. Which is a shame, because YouTube, in its history, was really all about the little guy just putting up pictures of his dog, videos of his dog, running around in the backyard, or his fishing trip, or this or that or the other. And they've really made it harder for the little guy to grow. There wasn't necessarily anything political in
Well, but
that.
oddly
But
enough, I did
um,
read an article where when YouTube was, everybody was competing to break out for the lead. YouTube was able to separate themselves from the pack and became dominant because they began to offer a share of the advertising revenues with the content creator.
exactly.
That's what we call monetization. They're sharing the ad revenue with the content provider, the creator. And that's what put YouTube at the king of the hill. And now they're doing things to literally erode the very thing that put them there in the first place.
Absolutely. Now they're taking the attitude that they are the king of the hill. They're quite confident. I think that they're wrong. That nobody's going to be able to come along and knock them off of their
Yeah,
mountain, and that
yeah,
they can do whatever they want to. Unfortunately, YouTube is owned by Google.
Yep.
Google is an extraordinarily liberal company with an extraordinarily liberal CEO. And although they may break with some liberal policies simply because they have some corporate policies about making money for themselves, the fact of the matter is they're totally bought in, hook, line, and sinker, with the left wing social agenda. And those are the people they listen to. That's who they hear. So when enough of those people start complaining and yakking, they are more than willing to go in and censor essentially conservative content. I mean, that's really what they've done with Louder with Crowder. And Louder with Crowder, he's the teeniest bit off color. He's not as off color as many liberals are. He's primarily a comedy show that
Mm-hmm.
attempts to entertain first and inform second, and he does a good job of it. If you don't like his style of humor, you don't like his style of humor. But he has his style of humor. He is first and foremost a comedian, but then beyond that, he's a social and political commentator who brings his social and political commentary into what he's doing. That's nothing different than what Stephen Colbert is doing.
I was going to say, what is the opening monologue on late night shows? Basically, what has happened is the line between satire and hate speech is getting very, very blurry.
Yes, yes, and liberals get away with more than conservatives do. Stephen Colbert doesn't really take a hit when he referred to Donald Trump as Putin's cock holster, for example. Okay. And so the liberals are kind of doing whatever they want with this, and it's making it more difficult for the conservatives. Now, Mark, you get into a question, you can get mad about it, and you can complain about it. You can complain to YouTube about it. You can tell the truth about it. But what do we as conservatives want to do about it? Okay. And one of the things that we have to do, I'm not saying at this time, stop using YouTube, because right now, YouTube is the game in town. Okay. For streaming video and for getting it to your platform and everything else that you're doing. And you actually understand that a little better than I do. But Mark, I can remember a time before all their censorship games when you and I really agreed that Twitter just had their thumb on the pulse of what America was talking about. And if you
That's
wanted to know what America was talking about, you went to Twitter.
mm-hmm.
Okay. That's no longer the case.
No,
Okay. Twitter
absolutely
has
not.
they've destroyed themselves in many ways. And it's a joke if you go look on there and see what's trending now. A, it's just dead. And B, it's become much more vapid, so that things like whatever the big thing is in sports or entertainment, that tends to be the only stuff, as
Well,
opposed to
the
serious,
same
hard
topic.
hitting.
All right, let me.
Yeah,
Yeah, because this is significant, folks. And when you say Twitter's dead, I agree. Uh, Basically, I think Twitter has made a strategic decision to get out of the quagmire of political discussion. So now, what's trending, and I actually took screenshots on two different occasions. One was the NBA Finals was trending in 9 of the 10 topics. The exact same, not the same hashtag. 9 out of the 10 trending topics were the NBA Finals. The only reason it wasn't 10 out of 10 is
right,
there was a sponsored topic. So it occupied
right.
1 of the 10. Later, the same thing happened with the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, and then at other times, I look at what's trending, and okay, listen, maybe I'm ignorant, or but basically, I did not know what the topic was about unless I clicked on it and read about it. It usually had
Yeah,
to
and it
do
was going
with
to either be a
Hollywood
movie,
celebrities or a movie
or
or
it was going to be a
entertainment.
Hollywood celebrity, or it was
Right.
going to be a sporting event. And not that those things didn't used to trend, but you'd see those things trending, and you'd see the hot 3 or 4 political topics of the day
Or
trending
current
at the same
events.
time.
There's news that
Yeah,
has nothing to do with politics. The coal
right.
mine collapse in Chile, or things that happen around the country. Tornadoes. Just current events, but not anymore. Now it's about
Iran possibly
entertainment.
blowing up a tanker, all kinds of things going on.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I think they've made a decision to cater the trending topics to non-controversial stuff. They're going to be like Inside Edition or Entertainment Tonight, where you can go to Twitter and find out what's happening in the entertainment industry or sports, perhaps. And that's it.
Right. And we'll get into a little bit what some of people's options about doing something different than Twitter might be. But Mark, I think one of the things content creators need to do now, I think you need to always be on the lookout for who's the next guy trying to climb the mountain. Who's the next guy that might be a better alternative than YouTube? Who's the next guy that might be a better alternative than Facebook? Who's the next guy that might be the better alternative to Twitter? Because the fact of the matter is, even if you start to build something successful, if it's overly tied to any one platform, no matter how good that platform sees to be, as soon as that platform joins this politically correct agenda, this feel good, nobody can be traumatized, nobody can do anything to upset anybody, let's attack free speech agenda, then all your hard work can go down the tube, because you can suddenly find yourself shadow banned, barred, the rules change, the goalpost move. I mean, just look at what happened with PJNet on Twitter.
Well, but that was actually part of that was part of a larger movement to get rid of automated content, and we got thrown in the pot with some actual bots.
Right.
And this was out of the Russian bot narrative and all that, which was a false flag. But nonetheless, at least I could take some comfort when I wasn't singled out. You know, a lot of good organizations who were our rivals and our competitors, and some that were not rivals or competitors at all, just third-party tools for Twitter, took the same. They had the rug pulled out from under them, literally, just like we did.
Oh yeah, and some of those things weren't hobbies. Some of those things were, growing businesses. That thought they were successful, and people have their whole lives turned around. When you start working hard on something, and you have too many of your eggs in one basket that you don't control. Okay, it's kind of like you have a business and there's one customer that has 90% of your business. I had a friend years ago had a very successful car detailing, not cleaning, but he added on stuff to cars. He did everything from adding pinstripes to giving somebody a leather interior to giving somebody a new sound system on their vehicle. He was somebody that you could take your car to and get your car kind of tricked out. And, this started off as kind of a hobby of something he did in high school. It turned into an actual business, and then he became very successful. He was becoming quite successful with it. And he's making a living and supporting his family with it. Well, what ended up happening is one of the biggest chain car dealerships in New Orleans decided that they liked him and started steering 90% of their business to him when people wanted something added on after the sale.
Right.
So it got to the point where he lost all of his other customers. He was making more money than he'd ever made before because he was doing nothing but serving this one customer, and he was backed up for 2 and 3 weeks at a time with orders from this one customer. Well, he got in an argument with that one customer. Bam, they pulled away. He lost them. Meanwhile, he had lost all of his other businesses.
Yeah, all the eggs were in a basket. So
all the pigs were in a basket, whereas they hadn't been at first.
But there's some new baskets out there, and you've done some research on them. What have you found?
I want to talk about a couple of them, and I want to talk about a couple of them. First of all, Parlor is taking a very interesting tack. Now, Parlor is probably most like Twitter as a platform. Okay, now they're pretty much vowing that they're going to be completely free speech, and that they are not going to censor content for political reasons whatsoever. So what are their community standards going to be? Well, they've decided to adopt the community standards of the FCC,
the Federal Communications Commission. And they're considering
those are written, and they're done just as if they were a broadcaster. So guess what you can't do on Parler? You can't do pornography. Okay, and you can't.
They even go on to say nudity in the form of art is still prohibited.
It's still prohibited, okay? But basically, you're allowed to do anything that Rush Limbaugh has done, anything that Mark Levin has done, anything that they're doing on the liberal late night TV shows. So they're saying, hey, you all that stuff on broadcast television and broadcast radio that you see, not necessarily cable, but on broadcast television and broadcast radio that you see that's allowed. Well, all of that is allowed over here. And left or right, we're not going to censor you for doing any of that. Their messages give you 1,000 characters, so it gives you more space. Instead of a retweet, they have an echo. Instead of a like, you give something a vote up. And they are having meteoric growth since they've started. Now, let me be honest. I've created an account on there, okay? And I'll tell you kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm really hoping that the bad and the ugly is going to improve. They're growing so fast that it's giving them some difficulties. I think they're probably so swamped with customer service type messages that they don't have time to get to them. I think they probably don't have the staff to get to them. And remember the old fail whale on Twitter?
Yep, sure do.
They have their own version of that, and right now it's just coming up way too frequently. Okay. Right now, you may try to do, a search for a topic or something like that. You're just going to get the message that their system is currently overwhelmed. Okay. But that's because of rapid growth. But I tell you, Mark, it's growing fast enough that I checked it out a couple of times during the week in different ways. And then today I decided to actually create an account and follow 100 people. Okay. So I created an account and I followed 100 people. 3 hours later, I had 60 followers. Okay, now I've never had a 60, and about half of them were people I had followed, and about 10 of them were new followers. I've never had a 50% follow back ratio before within 3 hours of following people. I've always used following others as a way to meet with them, engage with them, hopefully get them to follow me. But I've never expected a 50%. Yeah, hey, a 50% follow rate is great if you can get that in the long term before you go and unfollow the people that didn't follow you back. But if you're getting a 50% follow back rate within a couple of hours, it means that there's at least a certain sort of obsessed core group. And so far, it appears to be a lot of people that have been shadow banned or censored or harassed or just lost it with Twitter. It is dominated so far by pro-Trump type conservatives. MAGA people are dominating that platform right now. Now, they're doing what they can to attract different types of conservatives and even liberals because in the end, it's not any fun if all you're doing is preaching to the choir. But I think that it's got a heck of a potential. And let me tell you what I did as a test today, because I wanted to say, okay, are these people going to censor me? They're claiming that they're not going to censor me. Are they going to censor me? And so I put out a message today, and every one of these things was something I believe to be true. But there are also some of these things were things that could potentially get you in trouble on Twitter, and all in one. It's not a tweet, but all in one posting on there. I said, Jesus Christ is Lord. Abortion is murder. Islam was begun by Muhammad because Muhammad wanted to build an army, become rich, and get laid. The LGBTQ community has satanic goals. And I did just a quick list of statements like that to say, well, let's see what happens. Well, I got some echoes, I got some likes, and I didn't get any kind of a message saying that I had violated their community standards or anything of that nature, which I've gotten for saying similar things. Now, I still say similar things. I still say the truth. But on Twitter, I've gotten suspended and had to fight the suspension. I've never given in and admitted that I had violated the terms of service on Twitter. But I've gone in and I've fought it and I've argued with them, particularly on my Catholic account that I have over there, because if I'm spouting absolute pure Catholic doctrine and you're going to come in and call it hate speech, I'm going to go to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fight that to the wall. And so far, they've eventually given in and backed off when I've done that. But things are looking good so far, I would say, on Parler. Just understand that if you go log into Parler and create an account on Parler, that it's new, it's rapidly growing, and it's buggy. You've had a problem with Parler, haven't you, Mark?
Yeah, yeah, and I sent my fourth email or fourth contact to them today. I misspelled my email address when I set up my original account, and I'm just trying to get them to delete the second one I set up trying to log in. And
Okay.
I'm just going to be patient and wait because of what you just said. But the basic to summarize, Parler is using the Federal Communications Commission's rule book and treating themselves
Which is
as
a
a
written rule
broadcast.
book. It's a well-known rule book that we're all
Yeah,
used to.
right. And they're also kind of getting themselves out of the middle of it. Okay, they're saying this
Mm-hmm.
is what they're going to let that. So anything you can do on radio or television, you can do on Parler. Anything you can't do on radio or television, you can't do on Parler. So that seems to
Yeah,
be a
broadcast television, not
right,
cable. You can do extra things on cable.
right, because
Now, we'll see if they stick to it.
mm-hmm,
One of the things that really hurt Gab, but Gab never had clearly defined standards the way they do. They're
mm-hmm,
saying, no, we're using the FCC standards. These are our standards.
right,
Gab really tried to be all free speech all the time and say, we're not going to censor anything. And so then when Gab didn't respond to the mob saying, well, you're not censoring these KKK people, you're not censoring these white, supremacists. And Gab's attitude was, and we're not censoring communists either, and we're not censoring socialists either. We're not going to censor anybody. They actually went to the Apple Play Store and the Google Play Store and got them to drop the Gab app, saying
mm-hmm,
that Gab was guilty of hate speech.
all right,
Um, these guys will have the advantage of saying, is the FCC guilty of hate speech, or CBS, NBC?
right,
Are they guilty of hate
yeah.
speech? We're following the exact same established standard that the Federal Communication Commission has already set up. So I think it's a smart thing that they're doing. I think it's intelligent. And I would encourage the viewers to give Parler a shot and see how it goes. Don't expect it to be the best thing in the world from day one. Nothing ever is, and it takes time to grow. But it's a pretty interesting platform overall. I like it. If it gets going and working, and they work the kinks out, and you end up having a variety of different types of people on there, good news. Now, Mark, I got some other news that's interesting that's on the horizon, and I have mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I'm very excited about it. I like it anytime somebody that I like a whole lot comes up with a new business idea or wants to start something that I think I would like. But you worry that there could get to be too many newcomers, in the playhouse at any
Yeah.
one time, and how it's going to go and how it's going to affect this or that or the other. But Jordan Peterson is getting ready to launch a social media platform that is basically vowing the same thing, that
Mm-hmm.
free speech is going to be allowed and it's not going to be censored, and the exchange of ideas will be allowed on this site, and his spot will be called ThinkSpot.
Well, it's probably going to turn out a lot like CPM and Microsoft. That someone's going to emerge. I would prefer that if somebody wants to set up a new platform, instead of going head to head with Twitter and or Facebook, how about going head to head with YouTube? Now that's a substantially larger mountain to climb in terms of the financial resources to build the infrastructure. But nonetheless,
Right.
I would like to see something happen there, because what I've observed with Crowder in particular, first of all, Crowder was directing a lot of satirical energy at
Yeah.
the guy at Vox, and the guy at Vox is he's not just going to take it. He's going to do he picked a guy to provoke that he knew would be provoked.
hmm
Um,
But if the guy was smart about it, the guy would have wanted to get into an ongoing war with Crowder and make fun of Crowder and criticize Crowder right back, that would have helped both of their ratings.
It,
Uh,
that's exactly right. But now and this is the problem. Let me use another example. I was watching some congressional testimony, and the Muslim representative from Minnesota, I can't, Talib, anyway, whatever,
yeah.
was testifying to a Department of Justice guy. Not testifying, he was testifying. She was asking him a question, and she went into tears, recalling an email that her office received. And in that email, it said that this person had read that 47 Muslims had died, and he's really glad. And hopefully more will die. And I thought, well, one, that is a terrible thing to say, okay? But and she's asking this FBI guy or Department of Justice, what are you guys going to do about this? What resources do you have to bring to bear? And I thought to myself, as much as I detest what that
There's no
man
crime with
said, that does not meet the threshold of a credible threat, a clear
no.
and present danger. Uh, and I think that the government might want to stay out of that. Now, when you start talking like that, don't be surprised that you're being surveilled by the authorities. You're drawing some attention to yourself. But I would hate to see what legal action can you bring upon someone who writes an email saying he's glad 47 Muslims died, and then the representative takes this as a threat. This is what you and I see as threats, okay, or is different from what the left would see as a threat. Hate speech in and by itself threatens.
Right.
See, that's threatening everybody. See the socialist mentality? It's not so much that you're threatening me, it's that you're threatening an entire demographic, and that makes you, so that it's a different worldview. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but I would protect, hate speech unless it is, if you can't report it to the police, then just accept it and say, if you don't want to hear that, block them, or don't go to that YouTube channel if you don't want to watch that kind of thing. So I don't know where the standard is going to fall. I'm concerned that we're all losing free speech, and once you've lost free speech, you've lost a fundamental right. Now, the argument is, and has been, I've even said it, Twitter, for example, is a private company. And since they own the platform, they get to make the rules. Okay, that's fine. Now, so tell me then, back in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, a privately owned restaurant has a sign on the front door, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anybody." So this played out back then, and the way it played out is you may be a private company, but you are serving the public, and you can't pick and choose what public to serve. If you serve one, you serve all.
Well, actually, you can't. The courts did something interesting, and the laws, they created certain special classes that you can't discriminate against, which was really a slippery slope. You can still refuse service so long as you're not refusing service to something that the legislator or the courts have said is a protected class. And so far, they've basically decided, well, at first, it was clear that, there were only two genders. And so you couldn't discriminate against men. You couldn't discriminate against women. You couldn't discriminate based on race. And, creed got included in there. Now, of course, they're saying you can't discriminate against homosexuals. And now they're also interpreting you can't discriminate against gender to mean that, you can't discriminate against any number of weird behaviors that people suddenly decide is some new gender,
all right,
or some new thing of gender.
Then, and like you said, slippery slope. Name me a class that is not protected.
Right. Well, I'll name one. At least so far. Intelligent people. Okay. And there was actually a story on 60 Minutes on this. where a guy who had been a security guard for years and had gone and gotten like an associate's degree, I think, in criminal justice, applied to a police department. He had no criminal record, and he's a guy in his 20s, and he's a guy who's clearly interested in the field. They didn't hire him, and they told him they didn't hire him because he scored too high of a score on their aptitude exam. And their psychologist had told them that like there was a certain range of people that would be happy in the job, and that the people that would be the best off would be people who were above this intelligence level but below this intelligence level. And he sued. Yeah. And he lost because the court said that intelligent people were not a protected class.
You can discriminate against someone that they're too smart or not smart enough. Okay, right. But apart from that, in the world of free speech and the social media, it's very difficult to imagine a class not protected. Let me take a quick detour because we need to wrap up soon. Pinterest came out with an announcement that really was, it's all too common, but this one really, really disturbed me because they've decided that live action news is pornography and they've banned them from Pinterest. Now, I don't go on Pinterest.
Yes, they decided that a lot of their images are pornography and that they've also been peddling false medical information.
Yeah. That's just patently not true. Okay. They don't like it. But
no, live site news is is an absolutely legitimate player in the world of ideas. They don't like the ideas and the opinions that they're expressing.
Yeah. Well, there's a big difference between Steven Crowder, who is a provocateur, who is a comedian, who uses satire, okay, and this is nothing similar to life news. Nothing.
No.
They simply
they're very serious.
Are producing information about the pro-life movement. Very different approach to it, and they find themselves in trouble with Pinterest for of all things, pornography. And again, I don't know what specifically, but you are talking about reproductive stuff, so it's hard not to show a diagram at the very least. You've seen them. Just like you would find in a biology textbook in the 7th or 8th grade when we were growing up. They didn't show actual photos of genitalia, but nonetheless, they would show, drawings.
Drawings, diagrams, yep, absolutely.
And
we all got it as...
Yeah, that's information, and so that one troubles me. I don't know where this is going. None of it is encouraging. The most encouraging thing we've got to say tonight is that Pinterest, and they're not alone, but right now Pinterest is benefiting from the mass exodus from Twitter of disaffected conservatives and Christians that are taking to Pinterest, not Pinterest, but Parlor, and Parler, they're certainly I like their model of using known standards, or at least standards that have been out there, and they're not able, if they anchor themselves there and stay anchored, they can't just move the goalpost and change their mind, as in the case of YouTube. Literally, just...
Well, Mark, let me make one argument before we close, too, because there's something interesting that I also came across this week. You talked about YouTube owning YouTube so they can do whatever they want to do, and Facebook owning Facebook. But something interesting, these companies literally got Congress to exempt them from slander laws, under the argument that there was no way that they could possibly control content,
right?
And that they essentially were going to be the public square, and that just as Ma Bell couldn't control what people were talking about on the telephone, that they were not going to be able to control. Well, they got their exemption, worth a lot of money. They got their legal exemption, but now they still want to go in and control speech.
It's coming to a boil. I don't know how long it'll take, but there is a way to settle this. Okay, you're either a neutral public platform, or you're a publication. You can't sit on the fence and be one when you need to and the other when you need to. Okay, so
Right.
I think this would be the way to settle this. I don't like to see the government get involved. But if we're going to see government intervention, that would be the legal theory. And Ted Cruz has talked about this on the Senate floor. And he's not alone, but I know that he has spoken quite eloquently on the topic. If these people are neutral public platforms, then they're going to have to cease or at least severely curb their editorial control. Now, I have a rule that's very simple. If there is something going on one of these platforms that requires them to take action, I would say that there needs to be an accompanying police report. Okay? Obviously, if you have somebody using these platforms to commit real crimes, okay, with real victims, okay, and real death threats, or at least credible ones, or doing terrorist activities, or obviously there's a long list of things you could do on social media that would meet that criteria. Report it to the police. And that would be my question if I were a senator. You took this action because it was, you found it, in the interest of safety. Well, did you file a police report? Well, obviously the answer would be, well, no. Well, then why not? And that's kind of my rule, is where's the line? If you need to report this to the police, yes. But, if you take the platform down, that's going to hinder the investigation. Right?
Absolutely.
So of course you've got the forensics on things they have done, but now they know that you're onto them. So it seems to me that there can be a reasonable way to work this out. Just listen to me, okay? I'm I've got this all figured out. So I don't know. How long do you think it'll play out before it goes critical mass? Are we within days, weeks, months, or maybe a year or two?
I think we're within a year or two, and I think that it's there's a number of different ways that this thing can play out, but I think that normal Americans basically want to see free speech, and they want to see the free exchange of ideas. And there's a group of people who don't want to see that, because they know that their ideas lose. They know that they lose in the marketplace of ideas, and they're the ones that want to control the propaganda and not have counter propaganda. Propaganda is not always a bad word, folks, but they want to be in control of the propaganda, and not have any counter propaganda, and then not have any discussion. Mark, I've checked you out during the week. You got a growing number of hosts going on. I saw that you have a very beautiful new host that's come on to PJNet Live.
Well, Refugee, I have been working on, and a lot of this has happened because of Del Didway. I've discovered a whole new culture of writers out there. Now, you'll remember from way back when in the Blog Talk Radio days, you reached out to bloggers, because they have something to say. But Del has helped me connect with some very successful writers. And I'm not a big reader of written words. But they are very organized and very professional, even though some of them have day jobs. Some of them are devoted entirely to writing, and we're not done. I'm actually there's two more people that we may be bringing on board in the near future that we're working on, and we're probably, I hope, going to have to go to we're going to have to set up different time slots in the same night for two different hosts or guests.
Hey,
so that's good.
That would be a good problem to have. That type of growth problem would be a good problem to have. Meanwhile, Mark, we're in the early growing stages. I don't think anything I've said is going to get you kicked off of YouTube tonight, but me saying some of the same things in the future might. So we all need to be engaged in this fight and trying to develop our strategies for how we're going to deal with YouTube, but also be on the lookout for the next YouTube.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it unfolds, and let's let's circle up the wagons, and I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but we've got a week to deal with that. Thanks for doing all the research and checking
All right.
things out, and getting past the headlines and the clickbait and all that to find out the truth. So, Roger, you're a man of great intellectual resources, and we appreciate you taking your time to share tonight.
All righty, guys. See everybody next week.
All righty. Well, there you have Roger. Let me kind of jump back in the middle of things here and wrap it up. Thanks for joining us. I hope you like our new studio. We're trying some new things, and we're very blessed to have these resources. And I hope you like it. When we have two guests, we'll use the other studio, and we may do some more stuff. But until then, tomorrow night we have Bill's Bites, Wild Bill for America. Will be here, and we hope you'll join us each and every Saturday night for that. And if you want to know more about our appearing guest, if you'll just go to patriotjournalist.com, there you'll find the schedule of events and all that's included in that. And until then, we'll sign it over back to Hazards 4 here on PJNet Live.